Welcome back to Between the Silos, where we talk about sales and marketing alignment and why so many companies struggle with it. I'm joined by Nicole Klein, a marketing leader with over 20 years of experience helping brands stand out and grow. She's worked across B2B and B2C industries, leading teams, building brand stories, and driving initiatives that connect with customers and deliver results. So thank you for being here, Nicole.
Thanks, Jen, for the introduction and the invite. I'm very excited to be here. Talking marketing is one of my favorite hobbies, so I'm looking forward to diving in and having some fun with the conversation and chatting with somebody else that I know loves marketing as well.
Yeah, I love that you said favorite hobbies because I feel the same. Marketing is my favorite hobby. And sometimes people that are not in that world are like, that is so weird. So today, talking branding, most leaders understand that brand matters, but when it comes to actually building or evolving a brand, things can get complicated really fast. And you've got a history, they've got a history to honor, growth to fuel, and suddenly everyone from the C-suite or other areas have strong opinions about what the brand should represent. So as someone who's navigated brand development before, you've seen how quickly a clear brand vision can get diluted by well-intentioned committee feedback. So I'd love your take here.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest challenges in brand work is I think the perception sometimes is that this is just a design project, and it's definitely not just a design project. And even getting everyone on the same page about why the brand might need to evolve or update can be a big first step in the process. And from there, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different information or input or thoughts on what it could be. So it's really about balancing perspectives, also honoring that history, but steering where we want to go in the future. The input is needed and it's valuable, but without that buy-in from all those stakeholders and a clear strategy, it's really easy to lose focus and also lose the impact of the work that you're going to do. The goal really is to make sure that feedback strengthens that vision instead of watering it down.
When you said it's not just a design project, like that one hit a chord because I'm sure you've heard it. I hear it all the time. People will say it really doesn't matter. No one cares about that. It doesn't need to look pretty. And so like if they don't understand intimately like what your brand reflects or what you're trying to have it reflect, I do think people can think it is just a design project, and that does not like kind of pain your soul.
Yes. Or if you get just stuck on the logo, right? A logo or like you said, it may be design and maybe there's other components, but um and you might have, I think that's a, good clarifying piece, right? You might have a complete branding project and never even touch the logo, never even touch the colors or the design elements that are part of it. You certainly can, but that is not necessarily, the end all be all of the design piece, nor is it, and in many cases, is it the main component of that review or those projects of branding.
I love what you just said there as like you could do a brand project and never touch the logo because it's so true. And that like that's that fundamental shift that we all, in marketing try to get people to make where it's like it is much more than that.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you. So clearly you've got some stories. So I'm wondering if you can share with us some of your tales from the trenches of stories or companies, brands that have derailed or almost derailed by internal stakeholder dynamics. We've all experienced those.
Yes, yeah. I actually have, two situations come to mind. One kind of higher level and one a little bit more in a specific project or detailed. But the first one really is a brand where the business had evolved, which was great. It was great. There was a lot of things happening, a lot of changes and a lot of growth, but the core messaging and tagline of the brand were still stuck years in the past. And it really no longer reflected who the company had become. And the challenge that I had was really getting everyone to see not just the need to make some of those changes, but the opportunity to update the branding. There's a lot of pride in the legacy, which I respect, and you want to honor that and make sure that you play and you pull those pieces in as well. But it created a gap in really how we showed up and then how we delivered. And, as a marketing group, we were made some small changes and updates that we were able to in areas. that helped a little bit, but really with full alignment, that impact really could have been so much bigger and so much greater. So that's kind of a story or a situation at a higher level. The second really was about product naming, which of course plays into a brand as well. A name is not just a label, it is part of the strategy. And I think understanding that and having that be part of that conversation is really important. A name will shape the story that you tell, it will shape how customers understand it, how it shows up in different marketing components like search or social, or how you create collateral, and even the buzz that you can create around something new. I've
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, I've seen, the format and the history and font choices can influence that perception, both internally with your internal stakeholders, but also externally. And the trick really is to make sure that you're leaning into that feedback from those stakeholders, but still lean into those marketing best practices and the brand so that you're really set up for the strongest possible launch and impact of those new products as well.
So thinking about people listening, and they may be going, yeah, my brand is maybe a component or all of it is not coming along with where we're going or where we want to go. And as you said, trying to get leadership or others to understand the opportunity and the need. Any advice there? Like, how did you approach that? How did you tell the story of like, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and here's how the brand needs us at?
Yeah, I think it's really important to just again have those conversations to try to clarify that brand impact. And a lot of times that branding piece is the foundation for everything else that you do from a marketing standpoint. So I think it's really easy to kind of look past some of those like component copy pieces or taglines.
What I was going to ask you about in there, so I think you can kind of start there, but because what I often see is that companies will start with like, okay, yeah, let's update the logo or the brand or the mission vision. But when companies do it right, it's when they actually step way 30,000 feet above and look at the company like that across the board, right?
Yes. Well, and that's where I want to say like it's the foundation. And sometimes you don't see the impact of that foundational piece if you are not looking at it. And so you might, as a marketing team, we're in the trenches and we know that when we're working on messaging for a collateral piece or we're working on a social media post, or if we're working on a huge bigger campaign and a product launch, we all lean into what is that brand foundation. And so being able to take that 30,000-foot view to say, what is our foundation here? What are we all working from? What is the script of who we are and how we're going to show up? Then that makes it makes it easier for your marketing team to implement and make decisions for those campaigns and for those different tactics of marketing, but it also makes all of it so much more impactful because you are consistent and you're concise and you are telling the same story. And not only the same story, but the story you want to convey.
Spot on. Totally, totally agree with you. I do think having that brand framework is critical to everything. And you can see it in companies that maybe don't have that, where the messaging isn't consistent and there's no cohesive strategy or direction. And it really is like the guiding light of where your company goes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So then tell me, we talked about a lot of things. Well, why isn't it easier then? We seem to know, right? We seem to know why it's important. So why do
Yeah.
smart, capable leadership teams struggle so much with who they are as a company or seeing the value of that brand work?
Yeah, yeah. And I touched on it, I think, just kind of when I was talking about foundation and then the components. But I think it's really important to start with the distinction between brand and marketing and why that matters for the process. I think those two things get lumped together a lot of times and thought of as one by leadership or people that aren't kind of in the trenches of of a marketing team. And there's really two, I think, big components to the myth of having them be together. And the first one is just they're not the same, essentially separate components and separate pieces of execution. And a good way to think about it, I think, and kind of to go back to the foundation analogy, is the brand is the house that you build, and marketing is the invitation to come in. So marketing is how you speak to the audience, to your customers, to your stakeholders, and it might be through different channels. So that might be through emails, that might be through mailings, that might be your website, that might be social media. But you can also think of it in terms a little bit of long-term versus in the moment. So branding should be thought of it from a 60,000-foot view. That's long-term. This is decisions that last for years, where marketing campaigns are going to shift with different products, with different trends, with different seasons, with different initiatives, et cetera. The second piece, and we talked about it a little bit as well, about just the logos, right? So branding is not just logos and colors. Visual identity is definitely part of a brand, but it also includes your voice, your story, how your customer experiences your brand, and the promises you deliver. It's really the entire perception and experience of your offering to the world.
I love that. And I think strong companies that do this, that cohesiveness across the entire company, like when they get it, and when we deliver these, and I'm sure you've been part of those, when you have it delivered as like a cohesive, here is our brand strategy, you can see light bulbs like, oh yes, okay, that would mean this is how I show up in a sales call, or in, a marketing campaign, or on customer service calls. Like, it's sort of that aha moment that when you bring it all together.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's not just about marketing. It is about all of those customer interactions. So I love that you said, you bring in the service call or the sales call, or, just any way that a customer is going to interact with you, making sure that everyone is on the same page. And I mentioned it earlier, right? It's not just the external audience, it's your internal audience. The more that your employees and your internal team understands who you are as a company, that also makes all of those messages and interactions outside the company that much stronger as well.
Totally agree. So now we know it's hard for people to see that sometimes, but what's even harder is getting feedback when you are in the process.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Talk
Yeah.
about that if you would.
Yeah, so I think, approaching the project, I'd say there's, a few pieces that you definitely have to focus on, and having a framework before you're asking for feedback is definitely key. So being prepared, setting boundaries, thinking about how you're asking for that feedback versus what's already decided, or what maybe is already the groundwork that's laid that you don't need to reevaluate or have feedback on. So think about how or when you're going to ask for feedback. So maybe don't ask for feedback immediately. First, come up with that vision. Define and ask the why and the what. So clearly articulate what is the purpose of the project, what's the problem we're solving. So it might be we do need to refresh this messaging for our brand. In other instances that are a little bit, down the line, maybe it's something as simple as the naming convention. But what's the problem we're solving? And make sure that everyone knows the desired outcome. What is the end goal? Because then everyone has that part of that overall process and understanding before you start. Also, think about, as I mentioned, think about what's open for input. So, maybe creative execution is open for input versus what's not negotiable. So the core strategy or your brand standards, those things maybe have already been developed or are being worked on by a different group, that not everybody within that group that is making or giving feedback needs to be part of every one of those conversations.
I was just going to ask you that. So does everyone get feedback? How do you go about that? How do you go about wrangling who gets what level of feedback, and what is what is considered and what isn't. I know we've certainly been in these situations where the more people you have, the more complicated it gets, and everyone has their feelings and nuances about it, and it can get really really difficult to appease all of those different parties.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, having every stakeholder, if you ask every stakeholder the same question at the same time, you're gonna have 18 paths that different people want to walk down, right? So I think again it comes back to just having this clarity around what are we asking? What are the goals? Where are we going to end up? And some of it that might be, maybe it's by mapping out stages. So maybe it's determining what groups or individuals contribute where. And that might make sense just based on the functional area that different people are involved in. It might make sense based on a role. It might make sense based on history with the company or with the brand. It might make sense just where you feel like an individual has maybe a little bit more information to share. And it might come down just to authority and who you have identified as those final decision makers and the people that are going to have a final say in that process. But staging it out, I think, is helpful. Pulling people in at the various stages when you need their specific input, and then being clear on who does have that final say, along with firm deadlines and timelines, just to hold people a little bit accountable to making those decisions and knowing additional work needs to be done after those decisions are made so that you don't get hung up in a constant feedback loop at one stage or another, or even at the end of the process.
I have seen that. And one thing, as you were talking, Nicole, I thought about is where I've seen it go wrong, where it's clearly not mapped out at the beginning, is somebody decided to do the brand project, but maybe there wasn't complete buy-in on the executive group or the group that would be giving feedback. And so they maybe didn't understand why it was happening in the first place, or they weren't bought into the idea. And so what I've seen, I don't know if you've seen this, is that when that happens, the feedback loop can get really dicey because they really don't understand where we're going or why we're doing this in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that that's a huge piece, right? So even as I mentioned, define the what and the why. Um, Even before that, you're completely right. Make sure that this is a project that the right people have bought into and approved and understand. So that's even before you get to defining this for the larger group, right? You just need to make sure that the core people, that those executives or those key individuals that do need to really say and be advocates for the project as you work through it, need to understand the impact and be advocates for it and be proponents of the project. It will help so much as you get additional feedback from other individuals or need extra pushes kind of through the process to get people to commit to different components.
Love it. Thank you. Are you ready for the hot seat?
I am.
Here we go. Favorite weekend summer activity?
I would have to say pontoon rides with my husband and our dog Josie, with as many of my kids as in attendance as possible. I have 3 college students with multiple jobs each, and so it's hard to get everyone together. So if I get one, it's great. If I have 2, it's even better. And I think there's maybe only one time so far this summer I've had all 3. But
Wow, that's stage royal. Yep, I love that. I love it. Okay, controversial question. Which comes first, copy or design? Like you'll never get the answer right.
I
Right?
know. I do feel like there is a right answer, and I'm not even saying that because I don't think my answer is the right answer. I think the right answer is copy, but I always start with design, and I'm sure I frustrated many designers I have worked with over the years. Um, and you obviously have to have a piece of what you're going to say understood and know what that's going to look like. Um, but I do so much better if I have a limited, here's the design and here is the space that your copy can fit.
Yeah, totally get that. We are copy first, but we have much debate over the order. Because it's difficult on whoever goes first either way.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, final question. B2B or B2C?
Yeah, I probably have to say B2B. Just definitely positives to both. I've worked in both sides, obviously. But I just enjoy the ongoing connections that I feel like I've made with B2B customers over the years and seeing how solutions and products and services that were provided helped their own businesses succeed and grow over the years. It just tends, for me, it tends to be longer relationships, building relationships and kind of helping them over time, which just feels a little bit more impactful and positive to me.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been incredibly valuable, and I know our listeners are going to love your insights in how to manage the brand development process. So, thank you again for joining me today, Nicole.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And for all the listeners out there, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you always know when a new episode lands. Until then, don't forget, the best things to happen to your team will always happen between the silos.